Well, hello. I am going to do a simple LogiX example. It's not a tutorial because I'm not qualified to be doing tutorials, and I'm going to be figuring out things as I go. I don't really have this planned ahead of time. I'm also trying a different video mode because the video, when it's attached to the headset, is kind of nausea-inducing for people watching it in 2D. So I took the Neos camera and set that as a video output and attached it right above my left shoulder, so it will follow me around with some smoothing applied as I move, and hopefully the field of view is big enough that you can see what I'm working on. To make that work, I did have to put on a full avatar, which I don't usually use when I'm working on stuff, but I needed the estimation of where my torso was from the full avatar to attach the camera to. So there's you following me over my left shoulder. These cubes were just trying to get the field of view of the camera set up right, so let me get rid of them. Yeah, I don't have the grip areas set up quite right on this. Okay, so we are making something in virtual reality that looks like the old Mystify screensaver. At least that's the idea. I'll insert a clip here.
So this is basically what the Mystify screensaver looks like. I'm sure most of you recognize it even if you didn't remember the name. This little test program doesn't have the sets of a few lines following each other, so it's not exactly the same. Now this may look like the movement is a little bit complicated, but if I highlight just the points on the corners here, you can see that all it's doing is basically bouncing around a bunch of points around the screen, and it just happens to draw some lines in between them. So it's a very simple visualization thing, and I think this little test program took about 60 lines of Python code. So it's not hard to do at all.
Step one is just to make something that bounces back and forth within a defined area. So I'm going to start with a sphere, and we'll see if we can make that bounce. So before we can make it bounce, I guess we need to make it move. So let's pull up the inspector for that. And we're looking at this sphere here. I'm going to try moving it just in its local coordinate space. All the stuff I've done in the past, I use global coordinate space, but I think that wouldn't be ideal for this whole project. So I'm just going to grab the sphere, create a LogiX node for it, I think. All right, apparently I've forgotten how to work this thing in the last couple months. Okay, so sphere. There's its position. Hope you can see that. I think you can. Yeah, its arms are too short. Okay, so if I move it, you can see the position changes. And that'll go the other way too. If we set the position, it will move. So we need a LogiX node to do that. We will get the flow, I think. Let's start it out nice and slow just so we can see what's happening. Use a timer. We'll make something that fires, say, 1 time per second. That way, if it starts getting away from us, I should be able to stop it quickly enough. And let's say once per second, we're going to want to do something. So using some math nodes, we will, let's see, is it math or is it operators? It's operators we want. I don't know if you can hear my cat. Apparently my cat has something to say to us all. He probably thinks because I'm talking to him. Okay, so we're going to take its position. I really don't like these arms that are too short. Let's say that for testing, we want to move it only on X. So what would we do? Thinking. Like I said, I didn't plan any of this ahead of time. If I take X and add a set amount to it, like a very small amount, say 0.01 meters. I don't need that anymore. Okay, so take position, get the X out of it, add 0.1 meters to it. We're going to have to pack that back into a 3-component position. So we'll take the updated X, put that there. We'll take the existing Y and Z, because for the moment we're not changing those. And we will write that result here. Here you can see the current. Oh, now I got 2 of those. But the current XYZ is 0.33, 1.5, 0.12, 0.34. So that is X increased by 1 and the other 2 left unchanged. Now what we'll want to do is every second we'll go ahead and write that updated value back in. So I need to go back to flow. It should be a rate, I think. Or maybe it's not under flow. I haven't done a lot of stuff with the, what do you call it? The impulse-based LogiX, which is, I mean, this stuff is all, you see there's no, nothing telling it when to do something. It all happens automatically. If position changes, it redoes all the math automatically. You can see that updating when I move the sphere. And the other type of LogiX is impulse-based, which means an event happens, and when the event happens, it starts propagating a change through, and I haven't worked with that a whole lot yet. I thought there was a, like a write node here somewhere. You probably can't, I'm looking at the camera screen, you probably can't see everything I'm doing. Let me move you back and down a little more. It's probably under actions, not flow. There it is. So write takes a impulse and a value, outputs a value, and outputs another impulse when it's done if you want it to. But we don't want it to. So we want to take this as the input. The output goes back into the position again. And with my arms that are too short, try to get these nodes over here. Once per second, we want that circle to move 0.01 positive X. There it goes. If I change the rate here, let's say every half second, or even every 1/10 of a second. Whoa. There it goes. So it moves. Now we could get that to move smoothly, probably using update instead of timer. In fact, why don't I do that? I'm just going to disconnect the, oops, wrong thing. I want to disconnect the timer from the right. Get back here. Okay, so we'll leave all the rest the same, but we'll set that timer aside and use an update. Or a 1 per frame, I don't know, update. I was thinking one of these gave you a time such that you could account for frames coming in at a different rate. Because to get consistent movement, you want to take velocity multiplied by the frame time. In case you have frames that take longer to render than others, then it will move a short distance in frames that render quickly and a longer distance in frames that render slowly. But I don't know where you get that in Neos. All right, let's plug it into an update. I know that works with no impulse. There you can see it moving pretty smoothly and getting away from me. Come back here. Anyway, okay, we can make something move. Now what we want to do is make it bounce when it hits the boundary of an area. Now there's a few different ways we could do that. I was planning on using LogiX with, a size where if it goes outside of, say, 5 meters, it reverses direction, which is pretty easy to do. Actually, I'll just do that. I'll do that right here just as an example with only the X. So we have this thing that's advancing the X. Now we want to say when the impulse happens, we want to do something different depending on what the X is. So it's under flow again. There's if. So that's the impulse. That's a condition it checks. That's what it does on true. That's what it does on false. So if the X value, come on, it wants a Boolean. So I need to use the greater than. Actually, I want it to bounce on both positive and negative, so I'm going to take the absolute value of the X after the addition is done. I'm sorry, that's vector magnitude. Do I have absolute value of an integer? Probably just called ABS, right? I don't see it here. Maybe it's under math instead of operators. There it is. I'm not really sure what the distinction is between math and operators. Sometimes something that I think would be in one would be in another. Okay, absolute value of the X, operator greater than or equal to that. I think it goes this way. I might have to reverse these. Let's limit it to 2 meters for now, just for testing. Okay, there's our Boolean. So if that. Okay, now what we need is to store the velocity, which right now this 0.01 is the velocity. But that's not going to work. We we don't want something hard-coded. So I think what we need is probably a variable. I don't know if that's a float or a double. It's probably a float. This avatar has short arms. Come on, I want it up there. I don't know, can I set? No, I can't set that directly here. So this float here is going to be our velocity, which I will set to 0.01. Take that, plug that in where it's used there. Actually, I might as well go ahead and set that. That didn't work. Come on, up, up, float. Okay, float. Should have a value. There we go. Let's set that to 0.01 to start out with. Okay. Now, if I connect the update, this should work the same as it did before. Yep, takes off. Come back here. So what I want to do is if its x position is greater than 2 or less than -2, that's why I have the absolute value there, I'm going to reverse the direction of the, reverse the velocity, make it bounce. So, it's going forwards at 0.01, forward, it hits the limit of 2, velocity reverses to -0.01, and then it starts going backwards until it hits the limit of -2, and it reverses back to +1 and goes forwards again. That's the idea. And obviously this will all be done with a 3-component vector instead of a single float eventually. This is just an example here. Okay, so I want the if to fire probably the same time the update does. I don't know why that would need to be on a different schedule. Actually, no, I want that to fire after we've written the value. I don't know why, just because. So we'll write a value and then we'll see if we need to reverse velocity. On true, we want to multiply that variable, itself times -1 to reverse it. So let's see, I think what we do is we just multiply times -1 all the time, and then if this triggers, it triggers a write. So it's always calculating, but it's not writing it in unless that statement is true. I think. Let's see if it works. And I'm going to want to see what that x is so we can see when we hit 2. Okay, back to math. Time, nope, sorry, operators. Times, which I always expect to be an asterisk. So take itself. Are you even looking in the right direction? I guess the camera doesn't look up and down since it's not attached to my head. Okay, we're multiplying it by a -1. Yeah, not -21, no. That would get faster all the time. Come on. -1, enter. There we go. So, there's your forward velocity, there's your reverse velocity. Now we go back to the actions, take a write node. I hope this works with variables. It should. It works with slots. So this could use some organization. That's the onTrue. So when that happens, we want it to take... I need longer arms. Come on. That value. And write it back into the float. Can I do that? I can do that. Okay. Okay. Boy, this is a lot simpler to me when I'm writing code than doing LogiX. But that should just keep moving forwards until it hits the limit, which we set right there. When it hits the limit, it should reverse the velocity and start moving backwards. When it hits the other limit, just bounce back and forth. See what it does. 1, 2, yep, it hit 2 and it bounced. Should hit -2 and bounce. There it goes. So, there is how you can implement a bounce. Bounce, 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 bounce. And actually, since it's working, I can probably increase the velocity, and I'm going to make it limited to 1. I didn't want to increase the velocity before we had the bounce implemented, otherwise it would have taken off into the distance on me. Let's find that variable. Where was it? Oh, float. There we go. I should probably rename that to x velocity. And let's change the value to 5 times faster. There we go. Bounce, 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 bounce. That's obviously too fast to implement a Mystify screensaver lookalike, but it's a start. So all I have to do now is tear this apart and do the whole thing over again, but applying to all 3 components, X, Y, and Z. I'm just going to stop that update for now. Actually, I think before I do that, I will stop the video recording and make sure that it's coming out okay, so that I don't have to redo quite so much. Oops, not what I had intended to do. Well, I checked the video recording, and that actually, having that camera attached to my shoulder actually worked pretty well. But I think we'll try something different, just as I fix this up into applying to all 3 components. I need to find that camera, which is currently under my avatar here somewhere. There it is. There's the camera. I need that to not be under my avatar here. Back to root. Come on. Actually, I think Proxy has added a move to root function. That works. It's easier than dragging it to root. I'm going to take a quick look at my avatar. I think I saw something about something you could change that would make it so my arms aren't too short. Come on, out here. It wasn't the height. I don't even know if it was under VRIK avatar. User resize threshold. Height compensation, that was it. That's supposed to... I'll see what happens if I change it. See if it does anything to the arms. See, I'm reaching. It stops there. I've got a few more inches to go. Uh-oh, I think I broke it. I am no longer attached to the avatar. Well, so much for that. Apparently, you're not supposed to change height compensation while you're wearing it. Yeah, my controllers don't even work.